I want to welcome you to the webcast, Subagreements Subject to Excluded Costs, or what we call the $25,000 rule. The purpose of this video is to provide an overview of when the cost in excess of $25,000 for a subagreement is considered a distorting expense to your organization. You will use this rule when completing Schedule A of the Indirect Cost Rate Proposal and when calculating indirect cost reimbursement from a grant. Detailed information about the Indirect Cost Rate Proposal can be found at education.ohio.gov and by searching Indirect Cost Rate Proposal. Please download a copy of the instructions in the workbook now for reference. The indirect cost rate calculation should exclude certain costs specified by 2 CFR 200.68, which are costs that are distorting and produce an inequity in the distribution of indirect costs to the benefiting activities. Excludable costs include, but are not limited to, pass-through funds and subaward or subcontract expenditures in excess of $25,000. The topic about what subcontracts are subject to this regulation can be very confusing and requires use of judgment. The key is to think about the amount of administrative support required by your organization to execute the contract deliverables. One could think of a subarrangement that meets the criteria similar to pass-through funds. Although 100% of the pass-through funds are excluded costs, you must exclude only the amount greater than $25,000 for subcontracts that meet the federal requirement. Schedule A of the Indirect Cost Workbook will be used to report your qualifying subcontracts when calculation of the indirect cost is made. Next, we will touch on some questions to ask yourself and examples of what types of contracts are subject to the federal regulation, as well as examples of contracts that are not. Some questions to ask yourself when thinking about the substance of the relationship are: how much administrative handling is involved in the activity? How much administrative effort is involved in the accounting and oversight? Or does the activity generate administrative overhead? We will expand on these questions on this slide and the next. Some examples of subarrangements that the $25,000 rule would apply are: when a district has students who are court-ordered to facilities full-time, or a district contracts with a Boys and Girls Club to provide after-school tutoring assistance to at-risk children. In these situations, the services are provided by another entity at another location, and all administrative costs are incurred by the contractor. Similarly, a district may choose to contract with an outside vendor to provide transportation service and no longer handles payroll for bus drivers or the payment of invoices to a fuel supplier. In this scenario, the district only issues payments, resulting in very little effort and overhead. Although there are minimal costs to your organization in the above examples, federal regulations do recognize that a district incurs some cost, such as executing the contract or the payment of invoices. Therefore, you are limited to the first $25,000 of the subcontracted amount in the direct base. On the flip side, if your district can say yes to the following questions, such as: is your entity responsible for payroll, purchasing, or procurement, accounting, human resources, and other similar administrative functions? Or does your entity hire the staff, pay for salaries and associated costs, account for funds, and/or manage the budget? Or how about, where are the services and activities performed? At your location? Are supplies, equipment, accounting services, or similar activities used on a regular basis? Are managers and administrative staff routinely involved in the subcontractor's day-to-day activities? If you said yes to these questions, most likely the $25,000 rule will not apply, and the subcontract would not need to be reported on Schedule A of the Indirect Cost Rate Workbook. As an example, let's say a grantee contracts with a software vendor to provide technical support and enhancement of business software, or a grantee hires an individual to perform speech pathology services to students in the school. In these examples, the services are provided by another entity, but the work is directed by your organization and the contractor requires oversight or collaboration by staff employed by your organization. Furthermore, the services are performed at your location. Consequently, your entity is responsible for administrative costs, and your efforts are more than issuing payments to a vendor. As a result, the vendor's full contract amount is not distorting, and the full amount will remain part of the direct base. For example, see Appendix E, titled the $25,000 Rule, in the Indirect Cost Rate Proposal Instructions. We talked about Schedule A earlier. Here is a sample screenshot of an organization's completed Schedule A. As you can see, the vendor's expenditures are coded to purchase services or Object 400 in varying direct cost functions. The organization has determined the sub-relationships require minimal administrative support and would meet the $25,000 rule. In other words, the vendors listed on this schedule are providing services to your organization, but your organization is not a part of fulfilling the deliverables and would therefore have very little overhead cost in overseeing the project or service. The costs more than $25,000 are found in column I, which totaled $1,158,220. The $100,000 total in column H will remain part of the modified total direct cost, which is automatically reported in the schedule of expenditures. Finally, you will manually enter the excluded amounts by function that are in excess of $25,000 from column I on Schedule A into the same column on Schedule B. To double check that you have transferred all excluded costs from one worksheet to the next, be sure that the totals on both schedules match. Thank you for taking the time to view this video. We hope this information is helpful. Please remember, the Indirect Cost Rate Proposal Instructions provide step-by-step guidance on how to complete each worksheet. Additionally, should you have any questions or feel you just need a little more information, please do not hesitate to contact your grants management consultant listed in the CCIP address book, or email your questions to grants.management@education.ohio.gov.